So for council's edification, I advised the clerk that we were adjourning the closed session at 6:45. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council rise and report from closed session October 15th, 2024 at 6:49 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Council met in closed session to consider matters. It is permitted to do so under the Municipal Act and as listed on today's council agenda and the closed session resolution. The following items were considered during the closed session and may require motions as necessary. First item was the approval of the closed session meeting minutes for October 7th, right? October 7th, 2024. A procedural motion to adopt the minutes was voted on in closed session. Therefore, there remains nothing to be done in the public session. The second item was a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, the expropriation of lands. The third item was litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, specifically OLT 24-000093 solicitor update. And the fourth item was advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, being a lease agreement. And I have motions before me to approve those items. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the solicitor update regarding the Ontario Land Tribunal file OLT 24-000093 be received. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that the solicitor's communication regarding a lease agreement of municipal facility be received and the confidential instructions be approved. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the solicitor's communication regarding expropriation of lands be received and that the confidential instructions be approved. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to our statutory public meeting. With a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council move into the statutory public meeting, October 15, 2024 at 6:52 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Municipality of Brighton takes steps beyond the requirements of the Planning Act to engage the community in land use planning initiatives. The municipality also holds a statutory public meeting on the planning matter and then receive a staff report with a recommendation on which council will make a decision. It is during this meeting that council depends on the community to provide input for our decision. This input may be received in advance of the statutory public meeting by sending correspondence to the clerk's office and/or by making an oral submission to council at the statutory public meeting. This will best inform council on the land use planning matter prior to council making our final decision. Recent statutory changes limit appeal rights to only the applicant and specified regulated persons. For details or information on the new appeal process, please visit the municipal website or contact the clerk's office. And for the record, Madam Clerk, I am aware that you have received correspondence on the file before us tonight, and you forwarded that to council. Thank you. So there's only one item in our statutory public meeting this evening, and it is zoning bylaw amendment application file Z06-2024. The applicant is Andrew Hunt. The location is 300 to 314 Whites Road. The purpose of the meeting this evening is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input toward making any decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. So, Mr. Warren, by what method and on what date was notice of the application given?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Notice of the subject applications was provided in accordance with the Planning Act and by mail on September 24th, 2024. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject lands were notified. Notice was provided to all agencies required under the Planning Act. And finally, signs were provided on were posted on the subject lands detailing the application.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject applications before council this evening?
Absolutely. Zoning bylaw amendment application, it's Z06-2024. And the purpose is to rezone the subject lands from a number of current zones on the property: environmental protection, extractive, industrial exception number 6, and exception number 7, and rezone them to the rural zone, just the RU zone, and environmental protection zone. This brings the zoning in compliance with the official plan designation of the subject lands, which is rural and environmental protection.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the subject application? None noted. Are there any questions or comments regarding the subject application from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon?
Just to be clear, Mr. Warren, you mentioned that this is bringing it into compliance with the official plans designation of the land. What you're saying is that these lands would have been considered rural had they not been a gravel pit?
I don't know if I'm exactly saying that. I'm saying the official plan designation is that they're rural.
Okay. Had there not been a gravel pit on them, would we consider them to be just regular rural land along with adjacent land, presumably?
I would assume they would be rural in character, either rural or agriculture.
Thank you both. Any other questions for members of council? Mr. Warren, do you have any final comments?
The only final comment I have is that there was an objection comment received, which you've mentioned, Mr. Chair, thank you, regarding the MDS calculation. I will admit I'm not an MDS expert. However, I have taken the provincial training, and as has Director Walsh, and we did confer on the matter in the preparation of the report. We're familiar with the process and note that the subject application is only to rezone the lands at this time, and any proposed dwelling would be subject to a building permit, of course, and that building permit would be also subject to MDS calculations at that time.
So that is the time when MDS calculations would come into factor, is when the building permit
Yep.
was being applied for?
Absolutely. Part
Thank
of
you.
applicable law.
Thank you for that. And these lands were subject to an OLT appeal during a different proposal. Are we confident that we won't see ourselves down a similar road? I mean, we know that people can appeal. I get that. But I
Right.
mean, in terms of losing an appeal.
I'm as confident as I could be that there would likely not be an appeal on that basis.
Thank you. Does council wish to make a decision this evening? I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council receive the staff report dated October 15th, 2024, regarding zoning bylaw amendment application file number Z06-2024 pertaining to the lands assigned to the civic address of 300 and 314 Whites Road. And further, the council enacts a bylaw to rezone the subject lands from environmental protection zone, extractive industrial exception number 6 zone, and extractive industrial exception number 7 zone to the rural zone and the environmental protection zone. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And that concludes our statutory public meeting with a motion from Councillor Fredis and seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson that council move out of the statutory public meeting October 15th at 6:58 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us to planning and development reports. The first report is land banking program. Director Walsh, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Nothing further, Mayor.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the staff report dated October 15th, 2024 be received by council regarding calculation of residual sanitary sewer capacity, and that staff be directed to present to council. No. I'm reading the wrong one. The motion before me reads that council accept the staff report dated October 15th, 2024 regarding council's directives for a term of reference regarding a request for proposal related to a development master plan pertaining to lands owned by the municipality, a business model for a general land banking program, and that council task staff to issue a request for proposal inclusive of a term of reference for a development master plan with the directives as described in this report, and that council tasks staff to issue a request for proposal inclusive of a term of reference for a business model with the directives as described in this report. Is there a mover? It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
I just want to say how excited I am to see this moving forward. I think this is a great opportunity to deliver some affordable housing for our community, as well as just envisioning the future of Brighton.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. A couple of questions to the director, if I may. There's both a master plan and a business plan. Do you contemplate both of these plans being done by the same consultant or independent consultants?
Through the mayor to council, I see them being done as two separate consultants. However, there may be one consultant who brings in associates to be able to respond to both. And so I think we should be open to either or. In the latter scenario, there may be some improved coordination of some details to the consultant who's awarded it to marry some of the details in some kind of optimal fashion that we'd otherwise not get. But that comes with more cost too.
Is a follow-up?
Yes. In reading through it, it talks first about the auctioning of lands, and then in the next sentence, it talks about sale of lands. They're vastly different in my mind, and whatever route we go, can I safely assume that we'll ensure full recovery of all costs, including any interest and servicing costs?
Director?
Yes, the business plan, the pro forma on which we started this program, it looked at a return to cover costs and in fact to perhaps sustain the program more fully over a long term.
Thank you both. Any other questions or comments? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us to hydraulic residual reserve capacity report. Director Walsh, we've read this report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Nothing further to add, Mayor. I just would note I've had some comments about some of the numbers not jiving in there, but it's due to rounding because original calculations were a few decimal places to the right of the decimal. So some of the numbers aren't exactly calculated as shown in the report, but that's just things were double checked in Excel and it is accurate.
Thank you for that. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the staff report dated October 15th, 2024 be received by council regarding calculation of residual sanitary sewer capacity, and that staff be directed to present to council as soon as scheduling permits to a bylaw establishing a policy for the allocation of residual capacity to development applications. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. To the director, will this, first off, the idea of a bylaw to facilitate or manage allocation of residual capacity. I think it's a good idea. But my question is, will the bylaw incorporate prepayment provisions for water and wastewater services?
Director?
Through the mayor, yes, I think that it's the practice in some municipalities in a neighbor to the east of us in Prince Edward County. They've had some agreements with some developers there to prepay in order to finance their major infrastructure upgrades of both sewer and water. So at a policy level, that would be an option to council, depending on our financing needs at that time and depending on the scale of development. It probably wouldn't contribute much on a small scale development, but on a large scale one, then it might be something we'll have to look at.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Am I reading this correctly that you say that we have enough units on deck that even if we grow to a 6,000 cubic meter a day capacity through the expanded wastewater system that we're going to attempt to build, we're still going to end up with only a residual capacity of 280 more households?
Director?
No, that's correct.
Would that not put us directly in that 80% plus capacity scenario again?
Director?
Yes, it would. How long it takes us to get there is another question. Historically, we've done about 65 units per year on average. If you take the 10-year average, some years we were up to well over 100. And it seems to be mostly correlated with what's in the supply, how many subdivisions have been registered. And so there seems to be a strong correlation to that. So right now, we're looking pretty good with the number of registered plans as referenced in the report. So I expect the numbers to go up in terms of the annual rate, and probably because 115 is one of the highest on record, and that was before some of the heated economy that we've seen recently, which is said to resume in 2026 by CMHC economists. I would think that we should be looking at probably, and this is a gross assumption, but with some information at hand, that we should be looking at probably over that 115 permits per year number. So I expect we'll be exceeding our historical peaks.
So if we didn't have any new applications over the next little while, just what you already know is sort of on the books or is about to be on the books, should last us the next 10 or so years, even at high capacity and or higher than normal numbers. And then we'll need to be looking at adding to the wastewater plant.
Yeah, I think we have a total of registered and pre-consultation is 3,253 units. So the if we did 120 a year, we'd exceed the 10-year time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you both. Anyone else? Councillor Rowley?
Thank you, Mayor. According to Table 5, the land banking program, you have estimated 600 units. And yet the proposal, I think, including the Russell lands, was maybe 600 to 1,000. So there's kind of a 400 unit difference. Where's that going to fit in?
Director?
Yeah, so our official plan establishes low density, medium density, and high density, and there's numbers associated. Low density is up to 30 units per net hectare, medium is 30 to 60 per net hectare, and high is 60 to 100 and something, around 100 per net hectare. Net hectare is after you account for stormwater management facilities, streets, parks, what you really have to your yield. And so I think the 600 was towards the high density. As you see in the previous staff report, we're talking about the RFP was awarded that. We'll need to explain the feasibility of what density we can realize. and for our market area. And so that will probably be something that we'll probably go with. And then we'll really know whether that 600 is bang on or high or low.
Thank you both. Anyone else? Councillor Fredis?
Through the chair, thank you. This is a little outside the realm of wastewater, but it got me to thinking about, in light of the projected number of homes that's in the hydraulic capacity calculation, will there be a need for us to address water supply to meet the demand? And what would the cost of that be?
Director?
Yeah, good question. My understanding is that during our peak demand times, we're at about 60% in terms of our ability to supply the water. And by speaking with our water guys and with Leslie, that our actual wells, we have two in particular, that they can supply. There's not a real exhaust on that supply. Like the drawdown at peak pumping times is quite minimal, and its recharge rate after peak times is very quick. So there's no real concern regarding quantity. We would need to get an updated ECA from the Ministry of Environment to take that water. We would need to probably have more pumps or larger pumps. And in terms of how fast we can actually chlorinate and get it through the system is another question, but it's something that we'll have to also look at.
Thank you both. Anything further from members of council? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is with regard to a septage analysis upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant. Director Whiteman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
No, I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council directs staff to submit a funding application. Nope. Yep. Got it. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council received the staff report dated October 15th, 2024 regarding the proposal analysis for the septage receiving station. The septage receiving station proposal analysis is attached as Appendix 1, and that council directs staff not to include the construction of the septage receiving station at this juncture in the upgrades to the Brighton wastewater treatment plant. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Just that I concur with the report and concur with staff that I don't see a great business plan for this at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is again with regard to the wastewater treatment plant, but this time it's the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund application. CAO, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to note, although this report appears to have been authored by the CAO, there was certainly involvement from our directors of planning, public works, and finance. They all had an opportunity to provide some information within this report. They are also available here if you have specific questions related to those departments. I will note as well that we drafted this report with the assumption that we would receive the funding in the second round of the Housing Enabling Water and Wastewater Fund. So we've designed the financial component based on the $35 million and that we received that and we are successful in the balance being funded by the municipality. Again, Director Winfield is here if you have questions regarding that.
Thank you very much. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council directs staff to submit a funding application through the Housing Enabling Water Wastewater Systems Fund for construction of Brighton's wastewater treatment system upgrades totaling approximately $48,281,107.50. And that council directs staff to report back on the outcome of the HUSIF second intake funding application to present the options for financing the project. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. And CAO, I recognize that a number of people have contributed, so I'm just going to throw my comments and questions out and let you direct traffic as to who they should go to. I note that the design has been modified to add additional tanks to accommodate the expansion, future expansion to 6,000 M3. And I guess in partly as a result of that, the cost has increased by some $8 million. Now, the original forecast was 12 to 15 million to increase capacity for the original proposal. In light of this $8 million increase at this stage, and with these additional tanks being built in, does this then suggest that a further $7 to $8 million will be required at some point in the not too distant future to achieve this increased capacity? Is my first question.
CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fratis. Part of the reason that the recommendation is approximately is because there definitely are some moving parts. So when we were unsuccessful the first time, we did seek that clarification, and the province indicated that we didn't have the numbers, and we also recognized that we were reaching capacity. So we thought it was important to bring this back to council with the additional tanks. The additional tanks would be installed, although not connected. So there would be some additional cost at some point, but the 7 to 8 million, I'm a little uncertain as to what that would look like when the time comes. There is space being allocated for additional blowers and pumps so that that connection can happen relatively easily, but I don't have those exact numbers to determine what the cost would be to connect. And, expecting that connection probably wouldn't happen that quickly. I'm sure that that there would be some increase in inflation by the time that happens. So it's difficult for me to give you an exact number, but the idea was to have the tanks there and space available so that we wouldn't have to go back and do major construction that was going to create the higher cost that was presented by the consultant without going ahead now.
Thank you both. Councillor Fratis.
Thank you. The data states that based on receiving 35 million, we'd need to finance 13 million through user fees and development charges. Now, the user fees, based on $470,000 in financing from the existing 3,655 homes, would amount to about $128.64 per home, approximately, for 25 years. Which would be an 80-cent per M3 increase, or 44%. A fairly significant number. Now, the report also states the data says the balance would come from development charges, but the report indicates that these charges would not be readily available and could take up to 10 years to collect. So my concern is, if it's going to take us up to 10 years to collect the development charges portion of this financing arrangement, who pays for the shortfall during the time frame? Do we have the reserves to cover it? And if ratepayers are funding the cost of this growth, when do they get reimbursement?
CAO. Director Whitfield.
Thank you, Mayor Ostrander, through you to Councillor Fratis. The development charges, we do have a residual balance at the moment. Also, as we collect development charges each year, which will obviously have to increase if the project goes forward in what's being suggested in this report. So those development charges, if it takes 10 years to collect them all, but it's a 25-year loan, we're going to collect in advance for the most part. If we have a shortfall in any given year, we'll just borrow from other development charges and repay as we collect them through the wastewater development charges. And that is something that we've done over time for road projects and other projects that exceed what we've collected in development charges, and then we just repay it and carry on that way. We try to keep everything within the development charges total collection and borrow internally through the development charges to make sure that we're not affecting any other component of our financials. I suppose that in the event that we had to use more than what we had available, we would have to come back to council and inform council that we've got internal borrowing to do in order to fund the loans that are essential to, you know, making that project continue on. We'll have to, I imagine those loans will be 25 years or more. And so that's the best answer I can give you at this point.
Thank you. It's my understanding that the USIF is also, you can piggyback with other grants. So if other grants become available, there's no restriction from an infrastructure. There's limited restrictions from an infrastructure granting perspective. Is that true?
True, Mr. Mayor. We're not able to stack with any other provincial funding aside from the OCIF and the Building Faster Fund, I think was the name. We can stack with any federal funding.
Apologies. That's what I was getting at, was federal funding, not provincial. We wouldn't want to double dip with our provincial friends, of course. Any other go ahead, Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to the CEO, thank you. And this may not be the area to talk about it, but in the last presentation from JLR, there was a scope of things that were identified for a determination as to whether to proceed or not. And this evening, we got the staff report advising not to proceed with septage because there was not a business model or business case for it. In that same presentation, there was a reference to the admin building, about $1.8 million. And in looking at the sketch of the admin building, it looks kind of spiffy, but I'm looking at it and I see 3 offices, 2 washrooms, a lunchroom, some other, and 2 other rooms, one of which looks like it might be a lab. And the question that comes to mind is, if we have 3 offices for operators there, is the implication that this is that complex a facility? It takes 3 full-time operators per shift to run it. So are we potentially talking 9 operators? And if there is a lab in there, plus a lab technician, so 10 people, is that what I'm to read from this sketch? And if that's not the interpretation, and it's really more the existing complement, then my question is multi-part. What happens to our existing admin building? Because I understand it contains pumps and stuff. Are they going to be utilized in the process, or are they scrapped? Is there any way of building onto that to add this capability that we need? Or alternatively, if we have to go to a new structure, is there some opportunity to shrink this back down to something that's more consistent with our staffing going forward?
Director Whiteman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Feradas. We have had discussions with JL Richards with regard to what our future staff complement would be. It would probably most likely be either a Class 2 or Class 3 plant, and we would have probably 3 operators. Not running for 24 hours. I don't speculate. I don't think that's going to happen, but for 3 operators. With regard to lab, if we were to outsource that lab work, it would probably work out more expensive as opposed to having something internally, which we have readily available to ourselves. So I think in due course, it would be more of a cost savings.
Director Whiteman, we froze on you. If you could go back about, I don't know.
Try again.
Start at the labs.
Okay, at the labs. Okay. With regard to the labs, we could outsource it. But what I was trying to say is that it would probably be more expensive over a longer term, as opposed to having it readily available to us. and whatever issues that do occur, where we can address them. So I don't have those figures on me offhand, but I'm assuming that that would be a good case to make. So readily available. We do plan on having 3 operators, and probably someone who could assist us with lab. I don't know at this point in time. It would be most likely either a class 2 or a class 3 plant. So that would also facilitate whatever it is that's needed to facilitate such a plant. The infrastructure, that which is salvageable in the old administrative building, would be, I think, ferric pumps or something to do with ferric required to chemically stabilize the present lagoon system that we do have. They're fairly old, and whatever does exist in our old admin building, it is old, and whatever we're getting right now is fairly new. The costs from a new admin building, if we were to compress it or condense it, I suppose, it would be probably not that significant, let's say, in terms of the overall costs that we would incur. Somewhere like maybe, I'm guessing, somewhere like 250 to 400,000 that we could possibly save if we were to condense any admin building. So we are planning for the future, and I also think that given the application that we have made to the Housing Enabling Water System Fund, we are basically upscaling or doubling our housing stock in due course, not over the next 5 or 10 years, but probably over a 20-year period. I think that's safe to say. So the plant would be readily, state of the art and ready to run to take care of whatever growth and development that is to take place over that time frame.
Thank you both. I don't think any of this hinges on whether or not we provide staff with the okay to apply for this fund with the numbers we've set out at the moment. But I think it might behoove all of us to have a staff report that provides us with some justifications on the options. We dealt with septage this evening as an example. Might be good to provide us with some background information and answer the probablys. It's good to know that it would probably cost us more money to outsource the lab work, but will it? That would be good information to have. So if you need direction for that.
If I could just ask a question on timing. We anticipate this application is due November the 1st. We anticipate that we will see something in the new year, and based on our timelines with the ministry and the expectation of when this design is completed and we tender, we assume that we are going to know whether or not we'll have funding at time of tender. So somewhere in there, I would expect that we will know what we're tendering. Those costs will come back, and we would provide then costs to council or the benefit or not, depending on what it is, what the tender price comes in and whether or not we receive funding. So I suppose what I'm asking is March next year sufficient, or are you looking for something prior to that?
I think we probably need, I think the concern is not the $35 million. I mean, obviously that's a concern. If we don't get that those funds will be in trouble. So we're certainly hopeful that our friends at the province are hearing our plight and will provide. It's the other amount of money that the municipality has to fund. So if these options are in fact options and we can justify them, great. But if we can't justify them, then I think it would be good to have that information. And I don't want to go down the road of spending money on full-on design if we think they're going to get removed. But Councillor Freitas.
I think I agree with what you're saying, Mayor. I don't see anything that would stop or prohibit us from putting the application in the way it's currently configured. That makes perfect sense to me. But what I would hope we would do over the ensuing months sort of thing is to do a little deeper dive on some of the elements of costs. I mean, we've identified septage, but I have some questions regarding the admin building. I haven't even turned my thoughts yet to the headworks, because that's a big number, 4.5 million, and we're going to have a fun conversation on that one. But, and I hear the director's comments about internal lab versus external lab. But before we make that leap of faith, because I keep hearing about how stringent and meticulous MECP is about all of the standards from TAN to TSS and everything else. And because we're going to a mechanical plant, it's no longer a range, it's a hard target we have to hit. The question in my mind is, will they accept results from a staff member versus an independent outside body? I'd hate to see us spend $250,000 to put a lab, $100,000 to hire a lab technician, to find out that the MECP will not sign off on it because of a perception of bias and the higher standards they're holding us to. So I'd feel more comfortable if we could do that sort of investigation as part of the ongoing analysis.
I agree. And I don't think we're looking for a report next meeting by any stretch of the imagination. So March probably makes a lot of sense as I'm sitting here thinking of timelines and budget deliberations and all the things we have to do between now and then. So sooner rather than later, but if March is the right timeline, then that makes sense.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think if we if we do not get the funding, we're going to come back and scale this back dramatically. So that will be a completely different report. With regards to the design, the consultant has indicated that the design can be done to incorporate all of these items, and then we can choose at time of tender. So if council is good until March, I think it would give us a better idea without putting a lot of staff time into it, pending the results of the funding, and then enable us to look at those individual items and come back to council on the costs and the value of including them or not, even prior to the tender coming back. I think we could do that.
Fair enough. Thank you. Director Whiteman.
Yes, just through you, Mr. Mayor, just want to list something that I did forget. We are obviously in collaboration with the MOE, and
your sound is going in and out, Director Whiteman. We couldn't hear that last bit.
So we are in consultation with the MOE on a regular basis, monthly basis. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And they have their own, let's call them dead drop dates as well with the MOE. So they have an updated schedule. They are aiming to have their 66% design by the end of October, and to have everything, I think, out to tender probably March. They're aiming for next year. And that is also kind of written in stone with the MOE as to them working with us, let's say collaboratively. So I just wanted to highlight that, and it is a bit of a moving target at this point. There are some unknowns, and some items would be provisional. So keeping that all in mind, it would be premature, I think, to provide any accurate or specifics at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon? No? Anyone else? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Go get us some money. We have no items for information purposes. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first bylaw is with regard to 300-314 Whites Road. Zoning bylaw amendment. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading, and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, R.S.O. 1990, to amend bylaw number 140-2002, as otherwise amended, of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to the lands located at 300 Whites Road and 314 Whites Road, legally described as Part Lot 33, Concession 1, Brighton Part 1, 39R, 8834 Municipality of Brighton and part road allowance between Lot 32 and Lot 33, Concession 1 Brighton closed by C139807, Part Lot 33, 32 Concession 1 Brighton, Part 123, 38R 4945 Municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? Anybody know what any of that means? All those in favor? Motion's carried. If you said repeat that, I would say it's written right in front of you. Next bylaw is with regard to the agreement of purchase and sale of lands in the industrial park. It's moved by Councillor Ferretta, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw. Its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement of purchase and sale of lands, Part Lot 33, Concession B, Brighton, Part 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, Plan 39R 14445, ST easement was ST. Subject to easement over Parts 6 and 7, Plan 39R 14451, as in NC 304556, subject to easement over Parts 4, 9, and 10, Plan 39R 14451, as in ND 166097, part of PIN 51166-1238, Sharp Road. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Which brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery who has a question with anything that was on tonight's agenda? There are none noted, and there's no one on Zoom for that purpose. Bringing us to our confirmatory bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw. Its first, second, and third reading and finally passed on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Planning Meeting held on October 15th, 2024. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Ferretta, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that the October 15th, 2024 council planning meeting adjourn at 7:36 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, everyone. Drive safely home.